The antique shop on Maple Street had been closed for 3 years when Arya first noticed the wooden box in its dusty window. She pressed her face against the glass, her breath creating small circles of fog that obscured and revealed the mysterious object in turns. Something about it called to her pull she couldn't quite explain. Oscar had walked past that same shop every day for months, never once glancing at the window. He was too absorbed in his headphones, too focused on getting to the coffee shop where he worked, too determined to keep his head down and his life simple. But on this particular October morning, his shoelace came untied directly in front of the shop, and as he bent down to fix it, he saw her. Arya stood perfectly still, one hand against the window, completely mesmerized by something inside. The morning light caught the copper tones in her dark hair, and Oscar found himself staring longer than was probably appropriate. When she finally turned to leave, their eyes met for just a moment, long enough for him to notice they were the color of honey in sunlight. She smiled, apologetic for blocking the sidewalk, and hurried past him. Oscar stood there, shoelace forgotten, watching her disappear around the corner. That evening, he found himself back at the shop. The closed sign mocked him from behind the locked door, but he could see the box she'd been looking at. It was made of dark wood, carved with intricate patterns that seemed to shift in the fading light. A small brass plate on its side bore a single word: Veritas. 3 days later, Arya returned to the shop with a crowbar and a sense of determination that surprised even herself. She wasn't normally the type to break rules, but something about that box had invaded her dreams. She needed to know what was inside. The door gave way easier than she expected. The lock had been broken for years, she realized. Inside, the shop smelled of old paper and forgotten time. She made her way to the window display, her hands trembling as she reached for the box. "I was hoping you'd come back." Arya spun around, her heart hammering. Oscar stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the streetlights outside. She recognized him immediately, the boy with the shoelace. This isn't," she stammered, clutching the box to her chest. "I know," he said, stepping inside and closing the door gently behind him. "I came here to do the same thing." They stood in silence for a moment, two strangers united by an inexplicable attraction to the same mysterious object. Finally, Arya set the box down on a nearby counter, and they both leaned over it, their shoulders almost touching. The box had no visible lock or hinge. Oscar ran his fingers along the carved patterns while Arya examined the brass plate. Together, they discovered that Veritas could be pressed like a button. When they did, the top of the box slid open with a soft whisper. Inside lay a single envelope, yellowed with age. The handwriting on the front was elegant and precise. "To whoever finds this, your story begins now." Arya and Oscar exchanged glances. She carefully extracted the letter and unfolded it. They read together, their heads close, her hair occasionally brushing against his shoulder. The letter was dated 1952, written by a woman named Eleanor to a man named James. It spoke of a love that couldn't be, of families that disapproved, of a war that separated them. But more than that, it spoke of hope that someday two people would find this letter and understand that love, real love, was worth fighting for. "She hid this here," Arya whispered, her fingers tracing the faded ink. "She wanted someone to find it. But why?" Oscar asked, though he thought he might already know the answer. At the bottom of the letter was a postscript. "I left James because I was afraid. I let fear decide my fate. If you are reading this together, If this box has brought you to the same place at the same time, don't make my mistake. Fear is a poor compass for the heart. They stood in that dusty shop for hours, talking as if they'd known each other forever. Arya told him about her job as a teacher, about how she'd moved to this town after her engagement fell apart, about how she'd been afraid to truly feel anything since then. Oscar shared his own story, the music dreams he'd abandoned, the safe life he'd chosen instead, the loneliness he pretended didn't exist. As dawn began to break through the shop windows, they finally stepped back outside. The box remained on the counter, its purpose fulfilled. They'd left Eleanor's letter inside, placing it carefully back in its resting place for the next people who might need its message. Coffee? Oscar asked, gesturing toward the shop where he worked. Just 2 blocks away. Arya smiled, really smiled, for the first time in longer than she could remember. I'd like that. They walked together down Maple Street as the town began to wake around them. Neither knew where this would lead, or if what they'd felt in that dusty shop would survive the harsh light of day, but Eleanor's words stayed with them, a gentle reminder that some things were worth the risk. 6 months later, a new for sale sign appeared in the antique shop window. The wooden box was gone, purchased by the shop's new owner and given a place of honor in her apartment. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Arya would open it and read Eleanor's letter again. Oscar reading over her shoulder, both of them grateful for a fear-worn woman's decision to leave hope behind in a carved wooden box.